Welcome one and all to a very special edition of Titans Tuesday. Today we're talking about the very recently released Teen Titans Go vs. Teen Titans movie, the promised return of the 2003 versions of the Teen Titans characters. And I'm going to try to keep this review as brief as possible because I don't want to talk about this thing any longer than I have to. Let's keep in mind before I dive into this that my main issue with Teen Titans Go is not the humor, it's not the character designs, it's not even principally the writing either. It's that I feel that it's disrespectful towards its predecessor, as well as fans of said predecessor. And let's also keep in mind that I really enjoyed Teen Titans Go to the movies. I thought it was a lot of fun, and did a good job of, I guess the way to say it would be characterizing these new versions of the Teen Titans in a way that made them feel distinct from the 2003 versions, and also not only made them look cool for the first time ever, really, but made it fun to sit through their humor. I even, to paraphrase a bit, recall saying in my review of that movie that if that were more what Teen Titans Go the show was like, I never would have had an issue with it to begin with. So I was hoping, like really super frickin' hard, that Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans, even though it was another Teen Titans Go movie, the fact that it was a Teen Titans Go movie and that it had the 03 characters in it would mean that it was good, that it was going to be good. It wasn't good at all. I actually kind of hate it. I've seen it 3 times now, and every time I watch it, even though there's definitely good stuff in it, and I'm going to talk about that, I feel like it gets worse. At the very least, though, this movie does 100% confirm that the Teen Titans Go characters are not intended to be the same as the 03 characters. Like, that was already very, very heavily implied by wonky continuity. But, I mean, there's just enough similarities, and the continuity of Teen Titans Go is wonky enough on its own that some people still argue that they're supposed to be the same characters. This 100% confirms that they're not. But then, at the same time, the 03 version of the Titans in this movie didn't feel a whole lot like the 03 versions of the Titans either, so who frickin' knows? Anyway, let's carry on. The movie itself is about the Teen Titans Go Titans and the 03 Titans fighting each other for a little while before teaming up to defeat a much greater threat than either team could handle on its own. It's a standard team-up movie. And, of course, that greater threat that neither team can handle on its own is going to have to be Trigon. Like, not to downplay any of the 03 Titans villains, but he was the greatest of them. And the 03 Titans version of Trigon does return in this movie. He is one of the 2 core antagonists, along with the Teen Titans Go version of Trigon. The 2 of them do team up. They steal Teen Titans Go Raven's demon side and use its power to restore the 03 Trigon to his full power, mostly. And then they even merge together into... I'm going to say this right off the bat. I'm going to complain later about how they humorized, they made punny the 03 version of Trigon. This is the one pun that involved the character that I think worked. When he merged with the other Trigon, they started to call themselves Hexagon. I thought that was fun. And now he's even more powerful than he ever was before, because despite being just the absolute funkin' worst, TTG Trigon is still Trigon. He still has all the powers of Trigon. And they even ape the final scenes from Avengers Endgame, the ones where all the other characters start coming out of the Doctor Strange portals and they join in the big fight. And they do so in order to bring in different versions of Teen Titans from other universes in the multiverse. And it was a cool moment. It just didn't really lead to anything super cool that I feel they couldn't have come up with a more interesting reason to do anyway, if that makes sense. Like, oh, the Ravens end up merging together into a gigantic, merged, dragon-esque demon being that has Raven's powers multiplied 100-fold. But they've already got 2 Ravens there, and one of them is the 03 Raven, who's, like, awoken the fullest potential of her powers. I feel like this is a thing that they could have done anyway, with just the two of them, though the fact that the creature was made up of a whole bunch of ravens did allow them to give it the greatest name for a heroic monster character of all time, the Unkindness, named after what you would call a flock of ravens in real life. It may seem weird to start here, but I'm actually going to start with the ending and why I don't feel like it works as well as it could have. It was cool, like I said, to see all these different versions of the Teen Titans come through those portals. We got to, for example, get to see a version of the Teen Titans based on the version from the recent DC straight-to-DVD movies. We got to see an old-timey black and white version of the characters, a version straight out of the comics, a version of the very, very first original animated Teen Titans. But at the end, though, because there aren't a ton of different versions of the Teen Titans that are either from pop culture or that are distinct enough from one another, they ended up filling out this group with a bunch of barely mentioned Teen Titans teams that the Teen Titans Go characters hypothesized might exist when they discovered there was a multiverse. And so a bunch of the teams that came through were just, they were there to be a joke and nothing else. I won't say nothing else. They were also there to fill out the crowd, which is important in a big crowd shot. But they didn't feel like characters. They felt like props. And granted, they were only going to be there for a few scenes, so they couldn't really feel like characters as much as the actual characters. But they could have tried. The writers on this movie could have tried to make them feel distinct and not a joke. And it didn't feel like any effort was put there. It felt like the whole portal scene was only there for an Endgame reference, and that those characters were only there for the joke. That none of them were actually there to service the plot of the movie itself. Then there's the fact that once they were there, they didn't really do anything. They took the lead from either the Teen Titans Go characters or more prominently the 03 characters, specifically the 03 version of Robin, who is the one who recruited all of them. And for the most part, each version of Cyborg only really acted along with the two prominent versions of Cyborg, and all the versions of Starfire only really acted along with the two prominent versions of Starfire. They felt like extensions of those characters, only there to make them stronger. So I don't know why they didn't just write in like a power boost plot or something, some magic spell that the two Ravens were able to do together that just made the Titans' attributes that they're known for more potent. But then at the end of the day, I don't know what else they could have done, because the animation on this movie was trash. With the exception of some notable moments in the giant monster fight that I alluded to earlier, there just wasn't really much here in the way of animation at all, let alone good animation. And even that giant monster fight was just kind of a back and forth shot, reverse shot, stock standard monster fight. It looked cool, but there was nothing creative to it. So it's not like you could have shown a whole bunch of really distinct versions of the Titans fighting in very distinct ways, because they literally couldn't animate something like that. Like, they tried, or at least it seemed like they tried, to get the animation of the 03 version of the Titans right, and they just failed at every avenue. They don't look quite right, they don't move quite right, the way that they fight doesn't have that distinct style that the 03 version of the show had so prominently. Which is not to say there weren't some highlights in their action scenes. When 03 Raven finally decided to fight against Teen Titans Go Raven in that brief versus section, it was pretty spectacular for the 2.5 seconds that they actually legitimately clashed. I will say that I do like that at first they just stood around talking while the rest of them fought, because that's totally an in-character Raven thing to do. And there's one scene when TTG Robin jumps at 03 Robin, and 03 Robin just straight up catches him by his head and lets him flail around for a second. That was pretty freaking great. And considering the size differences between these two versions of the teams, it seemed like the kind of thing that 03 Robin would do. Even just, like, strategically. Like, it was a funny scene, but strategically, it was an intelligent thing for him to do, too. And there were definitely brief moments where the 03 version of the Titans felt in character. But those were moments that were mostly carried by the voice acting, because these voice actors have played both versions of the characters and they know them both very well. But then you have stuff like the 03 version of Cyborg flying around like the Teen Titans Go version. That's not something he could ever do. And then the two versions of Cyborg transform and combine together into a multi-dimensional spaceship thing. And again, while the Teen Titans Go version of Cyborg could transform like that, the 03 version couldn't. That was not a thing he was able to do. And you could argue that maybe he learned how to do that stuff in the interim between when the 03 show ended and now, but otherwise, there's absolutely no indication that any time has passed for the 03 characters at all. And not only that, but they don't really make any specific reference to anything that happened in the 03 series. Like, vaguely they do about Trigon, but even then they don't mention any specific occurrences that came along with his appearance. They just make vague, generalized references. These felt like placeholder versions of these characters written into this story by writers who don't know them quite well in preparation for somebody who knows the characters better to come in and rework it a little bit. Except that that latter step never happened, apparently. I will say, though, that regardless of how I feel about the 03 versions of the characters, and regardless of how just slightly off they felt the entire time, Raven came the closest to feeling like 03 Raven. There's a fantastic segment where she and the Teen Titans Go Raven are walking together back to the 03 version of the Titans Tower, and they have this conversation with each other. They're the two that are affected by this the most, obviously. And also Teen Titans Go Raven is wondering whether or not she should just give up her demon powers because they are so dangerous and she's so tired of trying to contain them all the time. And so 03 Raven shares wisdom with her, which, while it still doesn't specifically reference any actual moments from the 03 show, it feels like the kind of wisdom that 03 Raven would share with someone who is in a very similar situation to one that she had found herself in previously. And for probably the only time in the entire freaking movie, while 03 Raven did partake in the jokey jokeness of the Teen Titans Go-esque storyline a little bit, she was never made a joke of. Every other character except for Beast Boy, 03 Beast Boy got literally nothing to do in this entire movie. But every single other 03 character in this was made the butt of a joke at least once. Including Trigon. All things said, I wouldn't dislike this movie as much as I do if not for how they treated the 03 version of Trigon. Now, there's definitely stuff in this movie that stinks of Teen Titans Go-ishness. Especially the scene where the Teen Titans Go Titans sit down with their 03 counterparts, and the entire point of the scene is just for the 03 versions of the characters to inform us over and over again that the Teen Titans Go characters aren't that bad, guys, really. You don't have to worry about it. They're not that bad, actually. They're actually pretty okay. Like, that was annoying, but it wouldn't have ruined the movie for me. What ruined the movie for me was how they treated Trigon. First of all, once he's restored sans a leg. So he's hopping around on one foot for most of the frickin' movie, and made a goofball out of. And then he's getting puns made about him, and he's making puns, even though they do write it like he doesn't realize that he's making puns. Like, I mentioned the name Hexagon. He definitely doesn't realize that he's making a pun by calling himself that, but it's still a pun coming out of Trigon's mouth. He didn't feel menacing at all. Like, he felt like a threat. He felt like a present physical threat, but he felt like a present physical threat on par with the threat of the giant Slade robot from the end of Go to the Movies. The way that he was framed in each shot, the way the characters reacted to his presence, the way that he reacted to their presence, the way that he carried himself, the fact that he hardly ever used any of his powers unless he was facing down somebody who could actually withstand them. There was no menace to his presence at all. And unlike in the 2003 show, whenever we saw Trigon, it was always he was filling the entire screen, or we were looking up at him to reinforce how large and how dangerous he is. Most of the shots of Trigon and or Hexagon in this movie were pullback shots that included the characters in the foreground, the other characters in the foreground. So he just kind of felt like he was there. He didn't feel like he was the center of what was happening in each given scene. Like, his presence and the fact that they desperately needed him not to be present there was what was motivating everything happening around him. None of that came across at all because it wasn't the case in the first place. It felt like the 03 version of Trigon was being punked, like he was being made the butt of a joke. And I don't see why you need to do that to one of the best animated villains of all time when you have the Teen Titans Go version of Trigon right there, who's already the butt of so many jokes. Just make him the comic relief villain. Leave 03 Trigon alone. Raven's conclusion was good. She ended up befriending her demon side, like they actually get together in her mind space and start talking. And it turns out that Demon Raven isn't a big scary demon. She's actually just Raven. It was kind of Steven Universe-y, but it worked. I liked it a lot. As I mentioned before, the stuff with the two Ravens interacting was fantastic, in part because they're both voiced by Tara Strong, and no offense to the other voice actors in this, but Tara Strong is Tara Strong. Like, she's using effectively the same voice for both iterations of the character, and yet they feel so distinct in just the way she carries their dialogue. But the rest of the movie, and I'm not even going to get into the weird holdovers from Teen Titans Go itself that took up the middle of the frickin' thing, because I don't want to talk about it. But the rest of the movie was either kind of mind-numbing in the way that I don't even really remember sitting through it, or it was just kind of there. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good either. The only really good parts were the parts involving the two Ravens, and the only really awful parts were the parts involving 03 Trigon. In conclusion, I guess, this movie's a mess. It's stupid, and it's bad, and its few good moments don't act as an effective balance for its many bad ones. While the Teen Titans Go versions of the characters were all in character, the 03 versions of the characters barely felt like themselves. And then there's the ending. Like the very, very end. Once the 03 characters have gone back home, and we're just focusing on the Go version of the characters again. Man, when that scene came on, I was thinking, how would I rate this movie? And the good Raven stuff, at that point, was almost enough to counterbalance the bad Trigon stuff. I was on the cusp of rating this movie something like really middle-of-the-road average. And then that last scene came through and just ruined it. The Teen Titans Go characters have just proven again, after Teen Titans Go to the movies, that they are heroes in their own special, unique ways. They're just really silly about it. And then Darkseid invades their Earth. And they're so tired from having just fought a big threat that they sit on their couch and let the entire city be destroyed by him and his minions in the background. And it's like, okay, well, all the good faith that this movie built up was just thrown right out the frickin' window. I don't know, it's not like this movie was the worst thing ever made, and it definitely felt like a Teen Titans Go episode stretched out to feature length. So if you're a Teen Titans Go fan, you'll probably enjoy this. But if you were hoping for the triumphant return, even for just one movie, of the 03 versions of the Teen Titans characters, I think that looking to this for that is going to leave you very, very disappointed in the end. When we saw the original 03 Teen Titans in that ending stinger of Go to the movies, and it was implied that they might be coming back for another season, I was very cautiously optimistic. Then when we heard that it was just going to be a crossover between them and the Go versions of the characters, I was very, very cautiously optimistic. And this movie made it clear that I didn't have any reason to be at all. I guess what I've been dancing around saying this entire time is that any other version of the Teen Titans could have come through a dimensional portal and had a brief fight with the Go versions of the Titans and then gone on an adventure with them, and it would have felt just as much like the 03 characters were involved in this movie as it actually does. I don't even want to rate this movie because I would rate some scenes pretty high, but then I'd rate other scenes really freaking low. I guess it averages out to be like a 4 out of 10 at the most, but don't take that as gospel. Use what I have said about the movie throughout the rest of this review as an indicator of whether or not you yourself would enjoy it. And don't think I'm saying that you can't enjoy this movie. If you do enjoy this movie, I am genuinely happy for you, and I wish I was more like you, because I wanted to like this movie so very much. And as per usual, I'd like to know if you have seen Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans already. What do you think of it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord in the Teen Titans section over there. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.